Tonight, we take a look at the Sylvester Stallone action film Cobra with the film's cinematographer Ric Waite and co-star Brian Thompson. In Cobra, Stallone plays tough city cop Marion Cobretti, who does battle with a vicious axe-wielding cult while protecting a prized witness played by Brigitte Nielsen. Cobra began its life as Beverly Hills Cop, the film that would eventually morph into the hit action comedy that made Eddie Murphy a major motion picture sensation. Stallone was originally brought on to star in that film, and when he had proposed massive script revisions that changed the budget and the tone of the film, the studio decided to pass and go in a different direction. Meanwhile, Stallone took the ideas he formulated for the Beverly Hills Cop project and poured them into Cobra. Released on May 23, 1986, Cobra opened with a bang, marking the highest-grossing opening weekend in Warner Brothers history up to that point, but it quickly fizzled in the United States. It would later find its second wind on video and cable. Tonight's interviews portray the Cobra set as one plagued by ego and occasional incompetence. Nevertheless, in spite of its shortcomings, or perhaps because of them, Cobra is one of the most addictive and infinitely watchable films of the past 25 years. We begin tonight with cinematographer Ric Waite. In addition to Cobra, Mr. Waite's credits include landmark films like 48 Hours, Footloose, and Red Dawn. Did the Cobra project come about for you in the usual way? Or?
Well, yes and no. I mean, the director, it was a strange dude. His name is George Cosmatos. We called him George Comatose. Because for the most part, he really was. George would have made a great producer. He's a terrible director. He knows nothing, has no technical knowledge whatsoever at all. He could never understand why we had to get focus marks. I mean, it's true he did not understand that, the concept. Sly was a pretty good guy to work with, pretty good sense of humor. The problem we had with Sly was he was engaged at that time to Brigitte, whatever her name was, and she was in the movie, of course, and they were always playing grab ass and kissy facey and poo poo and all that kind of stuff. And we were losing, and also he had this entourage of, he called them security people. They were just a bunch of muscle men, really, but they were, and they were paid to basically listen to Sly talk. That was the bottom line, which Sly did a lot of. And one day we were shooting, and he comes roaring up to me. He says, "Rick, we're really falling behind. You got to push your crew a little harder." Now I'm noted. I've always been noted in the industry as being one of the fastest cameramen in the industry. I mean, I am fast. I know I am. I mean, I don't sit around for 20 minutes looking at it. By the time the director says it's yours and I've seen the rehearsal, I know exactly how to light it. So and I'm off and running. So I don't. Anyway, I said, Sly, if you stop playing grab ass with Brigitte, and stop bullshitting with your henchmen, we get off to a much better start here in the morning. And he looked at me like, no one talks to me that way, I thought, well, okay. I had two more. Actually, I had two more officer movies in the bag. Anyway, so if he fired me, I didn't care. But he didn't fire me. He said, okay, and he behaved for about 3 weeks, and then we went back to business as usual. No one else ever complained again. But other than that, he's a pretty good guy and a good sense of humor. And the only other thing that blew me away was at the end of the big shootout sequence at the end, the third act.
Right. And
we shot it out at Lake Piru. And it was written as a night sequence with all these motorcycles coming up and everybody shooting each other, blah, blah. So we went out there of an evening, and I don't know what time of the year it was. It must have been, November maybe or March, I don't know. But it was pretty cold at night, I got to tell you. I'm a cold California you can get. Anyway, and we're out there in our shirt sleeves. Well, I knew better. I always carry a sweater and a jacket in my car. So I actually had two, so I loaned Sly one of my jackets. We walked around, figured everything out. He says, it's just one thing, he says to George Cosmatos. He says, we're going to shoot this as a day sequence. And we all looked at each other and said, day? There is nothing scary about day. Look at Sly. I mean, you can see him coming from 10 miles away. But, it defeats the entire purpose. I didn't say this. We're all thinking it. But, it was Sly's picture, so we shot it by day.
The whole shootout at the end of it was originally conceived for night? Is that what you're saying?
The thing with the motorcycle sequence, not the thing in the fire factory where he finally throws the guy up on the hook.
Right, but when he's on the back of the truck and he's shooting down mowing down the bikers.
Yeah, exactly. They were staying in a motel, and
Right,
he got shot.
right.
And that sequence should have been a nice sequence, but it wasn't.
Do you enjoy shooting action?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We always laugh because what's the alternative is bedroom, bath, and parlor. And it's boring. I mean, like Footloose was, with the exception of a couple of sequences, dancing sequences. Most of the stuff, two people sitting around in the living room talking. And you do, take after take, like a case in point on not summer rental, The Great Outdoors with. I mean, we did 4 and 5 page scenes with 4 and 5 actors. My God, you do the coverage because it's all day long. You do a 4-page scene. It's boring with action. I mean, you're just moving out there. You got 3 or 4 cameras to set up, and no action. I love action. I love action pictures by far more than anything.
You mentioned Cosmatos, who you guys refer to as Comatose, which it's just priceless to me. So in terms of mapping out the shots and the visual scheme of the film, did you feel like you were basically on your own in doing that, or?
Pretty much. I mean,
yeah.
George would come in every day with comments from the previous day's dailies, and we all knew it was Sly's handwriting. I mean, it wasn't George. Now here's what I looked at dailies last night, and these are my comments. These are my comments, quote unquote. Everyone knew it was Sly's comments. It was Sly's handwriting. I mean, that's happened a number of times where I've jokingly said I could probably claim directing credit for at least 20 movies that directed. They couldn't find a way to the set without a roadmap. Never mind block out a scene. But the good directors never a problem. Like Walter Hill, Herb Ross. I'll tell you the killer was John Frankenheimer. I mean, he's the most cantankerous. He was the most cantankerous son of a bitch I've ever met in my life. But what a brilliant director, and I love working with him. And he's just got a great eye. But he put his hands out and said, "This is what I want, Rick." And that's exactly what I want. I don't want anything else, nothing more, nothing less. That's exactly what I want. He'd frame it out. Love it.
Tell me about working. I mean, not just with Stallone, but with big actors in general. What is your level of communication with the actor? And I would imagine big stars like a Stallone are very specific about how they want to be lit, how they want to be shot. Is that the case or no?
Well, sometimes yes, sometimes no. Like I'm looking at a poster for The Border, Jack Nicholson.
Yeah.
And Jack was really a great guy. I mean, he was just really a super guy to work with. It's a long time ago, of course. But the only quirky thing, he wanted to wear these mirrored sunglasses. And they literally were mirrors. I mean, the side towards the camera. So it was a nightmare. Every time I said, "Jack, could you just drop your chin a little bit?" Because I can see the whole crew, the trucks and everything else in your glasses. I mean, it was very, very difficult. Other than that, and he was insistent he wouldn't change them. So,
yeah.
But other than that, the guy was terrific. John Candy, I did 5 pictures with John Candy, one of the great gentlemen of all time. Johnny Forsythe, and John became a very dear friend of our family, as did Johnny Forsythe and Dick Crenna. Both became really good family friends with my wife and I and our children and their families. As my wife and I are currently with Kurt and Goldie. We go back with Goldie Hawn 40 years. 40 years.
Wow.
The night we met Goldie was the evening of the day she was then dating a guy named Gus Tricona. She finally married him after a while, briefly. But at any rate, the day that she signed a contract to do this brand new NBC show called Laugh-In. And it was that day that she had signed the contract to do that show. So that's how far back we go. And we have stayed over the years, and we go back with Kurt. Every one of those people, they're just I told my students that they think everybody's running around, on the casting couch and shooting up heroin or smoking dope or whatever have you. I guess it's very. Yeah, I've only seen dope and marijuana on my set once. It was a crew member, and I sent him home right on the spot. But
right.
I said I've never. I take that back. I mean, David Carradine on Long Riders smoked a lot of dope, but never out publicly, only in his privately.
Mm-hmm.
He never was never late for a call, and never blew a line for any reason either. So that I couldn't.
Well, that's what when you tell me the stories about the films you've been involved with, and I look at the remainder of your resume. I mean, you've worked with such incredibly talented but very colorful people, and we talked about Frankenheimer and Walter Hill, and they make very kind of muscular, tough movies for the most part. And then I look at someone like John Milius in Red Dawn, and who is also that kind of filmmaker. He's a colorful character too, isn't he?
A great big bear. John's favorite on that movie anyway, and I love that man dearly, truly I do. We had a lot of fun on that movie, he and I together. Literally a lot of fun. One night, we were shooting. We started in September, and we were still shooting in December. It was getting really cold. One night we were shooting. It was about 25 below zero, I think. Below, I'm talking now, okay. And he had told the UPM, call me when Rick's got he'd given the setup the night before. He said, call me when Rick's ready for the shot. So I set up the shot, and I've got 2 pair of electric socks. I got moon boots up to my knees. I got the Eddie Bauer bib overall pants. I've got long underwear, of course. I've got a turtleneck, a wool sweater, a wool shirt, and an Eddie Bauer vest, and the Eddie Bauer Expedition parka, and I got mittens up to the front of my. I was a animated igloo is what I was. Everybody the same thing. Anyway, I set up the shot. Told the first AD, okay, call John, I'm ready. And now sit down, have a cigarette, cup of coffee, and wait till John gets there. Which I knew he was at the time. He had some young thing at the hotel. He was probably banging her or something. I don't know if she was banging him. Anyway, he comes roaring up in his car, pulls up right up next to me in the set. He said, "Okay, Rick, you got wait, not Rick. Okay, wait, you got 5 minutes. That's all you're going to get." I said, "Hey, John, that's 25 fucking below zero here. If you don't want to shoot work tonight, there's not a man in this crew that won't happen to go back to the hotel and get warm. If you want to call it quits for the night, hey, be my guest. I'll follow you." And he laughed and apologized. He said, "I'm sorry, Rick. I had the greatest blowjob of my life." He was just that kind of guy,
When you give examples, for instance, when you taught, when you gave examples of great cinematography, what are some of those films that come to mind for you? Well,
The Bad, the Beautiful. Unfortunately, I still think black and white is the truest art form there is in terms of motion picture. I think color is disappointing at best. Also, the writing in the 60s, 50s, 60s, and early 70s, I think was just infinitely better than it is today. Now, I have to believe that there's no shortage of good writers. There's just a big shortage of intelligent readers. The studios today are no longer run by filmmakers. They're run by lawyers and accountants. And all they look at is the bottom line. And it's really too bad. But because I've written 2 scripts where my agent had set out, one went to Paramount and one went to Warner Brothers. I got incredible coverage on both scripts. This is a great script, great dialogue, great characters, great plot, blah, 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 blah. Get a star attached, it's a made movie. Now, wait a minute, get a star attached. If I had Brad Pitt, I could shoot the fucking New York phone book and make a movie out of it. So, that's the studio's job is to get the stars, not the writer, But nobody will read scripts anymore. I don't think anyone ever reads them. They have people who read them, who write the coverage, and the coverage goes up the food chain and finally gets to somebody on top that has the power to say, "Okay, let's make this movie. I like what it sounds like." And all he's read is the coverage. He's never read the actual script. He just read It's insane.
Actor Brian Thompson portrays the lead villain in Cobra, a sinister, bloodthirsty character known only as the Night Slasher. Thompson was a relatively new face in the film industry when the Cobra opportunity came around, having made his big screen debut in a brief scene opposite Arnold Schwarzenegger in The Terminator just 2 years previously. Cobra presented him with a sizable role in a high-profile, big studio action film opposite one of the biggest stars on the planet. What could go wrong?
Spring quarter of my senior year in high school, 1977. We can tie Sylvester Stallone into this because that was, I believe, the year Rocky was so prominent, or 76 might have been Rocky, but believe me, the year 77, all you heard at any athletic event was dun 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 dun. So that very same year, as I'm about to get thrown out the doors of the high school, I asked a friend if he wanted to ride home from school, and he said, "No, I'm trying out for the play. And there's a part you'd be great for," which was a Russian ballet instructor in a play called You Can't Take It With You. And I tried out for the play and had more fun than I knew how to contain. It was so much fun. It was dizzying. And then I went to college to play football at Central Washington University, and actually went there as a music major and got a scholarship playing the piano. But I lived in the drama department. I had plays falling out of my backpack. I read Stanislavski and Uta Hagen. I was a closet drama student and did plays every quarter. I just really, it honestly was something that the ball started rolling down the hill and I couldn't stop it. And then I didn't want to tell anybody that I was thinking about trying to make a living as an actor, so I secretly wrote to the Screen Actors Guild and Actors Equity to see if they would recommend any schools. They did not recommend schools. They had form letters they sent that recommended books. I read the books. The books recommended schools. I auditioned for them and basically got a full ride to the Masters of Fine Arts program at the University of California, Irvine. And that 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, acting, singing, dancing. And I loved it. I was just kind of enamored with the whole thing. And a year out of school, I got an audition for Cobra.
Wow.
And it was 7 auditions before I got the job. I got looked at 7 times.
Wow. But you in between that, the Terminator was right before that, right? You got a part at the beginning of the Terminator.
Yes, I got an agent before my last year at school completed and got the job in while I was still at school.
Wow. The
night that I filmed The Terminator, I did a 3.5-hour Shakespeare play at Irvine. Got out of there at 11:30, and literally drove 100 miles an hour up I-5 to try to make my call time at the Griffith Park Observatory. And I almost made the call time, but luckily, like most film sets, are a little behind schedule, and I got to keep my job.
This is what interests me, because you come from an extensive kind of theatrical background. So when you get in front of the camera for the first time, did it take some adjusting? I mean, did it take some getting used to?
We had on-camera acting classes as part of the program at Irvine. And I say this delicately without sounding like a clod who is full of himself. That class I was sort of drawn to, and the teacher, kind of pulled me aside and said, Brian, you seem to have a bit more of a aptitude for this particular form of acting, and mental note, maybe this is an avenue that you should be trying. When you're in a master's program, when you're in that extent of study, you think that you're going to be a actor in an equity theater troupe somewhere. And my goal was just to make a living as an actor somewhere, in some form, because I believe the statistics about how absurdly hard it is to maintain a career that actually would pay you money and give you health insurance.
Mm-hmm.
So that was and because of UCI's proximity to Hollywood, I tended to go to auditions. It started my second year as a 3-year program. I realized that the hurdle to getting the job was the audition. And my first degree from Central Washington University was business management. So you look at a business and you look at the obstacles. And to me, my product, my acting self, needed to make it through an audition because there's this well of nerves that stymies your ability to perform. And so I said, well, how do you get better at auditions? You get auditions. So at the time there was now it's all done electronically, but at the time it was a dramatic newspaper called Drama Log, which is now Backstage West. Mm-hmm. And they posted open calls, and I stood in line and on the sidewalk for 3 hours to audition for Lady Hawk.
Wow!
Because they had open calls, and so that second year of college, I drove up to Hollywood and made at least 50 auditions. And halfway through, I started getting offered some of the jobs, so I had to some I were able to do, but luckily was able to do school and work.
So 7 auditions for Cobra. Tell me about that process and what you went through to get that job.
Initial audition starts like all others. Agent calls, audition material, go to audition, leave, a few days go by, they call you back, so you got to call back. And you go to call back, and I met the director, and George Cosmatos, on the second audition. And the third audition was with the director and the producer. And the fourth audition, I met Sylvester Stallone. He was there. And he asked me, I remember the question he asked me was, are you ready to play the lead in a feature film? You're a kid out of school. And I said yes. What else could I say? Yes, I'm ready. I've been waiting for them and training for this. That still didn't convince them. I remember George Cosmatos and Sylvester Stallone were quite concerned that they thought I was too nice and that I wouldn't be scary enough to play the part. So the 7th hurdle was a screen test where they broke out 35mm film cameras, and we had makeup and wardrobe and lighting, and I had a screen test. Mm-hmm. And the day after the screen test, my agent called and said, "You got the job." And that was one of the great moments of my life, honestly. I was doing the Conan show at Universal Studios, and the entire cast had known that I was up for this part because it took a month. And we had all walked off stage, and there was all 9 of us in the dressing room, and the hair and makeup person said, "Brian, your agent's on the phone," and the entire place got quiet, and I walked. You're walking. I'm walking by Conan. I'm walking by Red Sonja. I'm walking by all these characters out of this barbarian play, and I walked the gauntlet to the phone, and I picked up the phone, and I said, "Hi, Cynthia," and she said, "Brian, you got the job." And I put the phone against my chest, and I said, "I got the job." And they all just tackled me on the floor, dog pile, phone. I don't know where the phone went, but I was on the floor, and they were all kicking me and punching me and hugging me, and I was the first out of this group of young actors to nail a really big job.
It's a defining moment.
It was quite a moment, because if one could do it, then the others could do it, and there was so much. We were all in our 20s, most of us were, and there was so much hope and excitement. It was very joyful.
What I'm interested in, because you talked about Rocky and the influence that movie carried in the late 70s. So now you're face to face with Stallone. How did he?
Just 8 years later, only 8 years later, it was really. I would have to say that I was expecting more collaboration. My character discussions were I could characterize as light, character light. Like I said, I was Sly. You like to be called Sly, and then the director said, I don't really understand what my character's doing. He was called Abaddon during filming in the script. I said, I'm not quite sure what these people are doing, and Sly said, well, basically these people they're doing what Hitler did, because they're trying to get the money, and I said, well, okay, but Hitler had a systematic way to retrieve money from the people that he was exploiting, and we're kind of going up to this car and killing this girl, and it seems indiscriminate. Mm-hmm. And that we don't have, that she's like a random target. So I'm not sure how that ties into what Hitler was doing. I said, well, maybe if we got some Polaroids, that's showing that she was targeted, or we're getting their bank accounts, or I don't know, something. And he said, yeah, George, get him some Polaroids. I think that was. I think that I have verbatim recounted the character conversation that I had. That was it.
So there wasn't a lot there for you to work with, obviously. So tell me your.
No, it was extremely disappointing. Like, one of the things you do for other actors is you stand there off camera. When it's your turn to act, you act off camera, so the person on camera has something to act to. And when I did the big climactic monologues at the end of the movie, I did it with the script girl, and I said, "Hey, where's Sly? Isn't he gonna be here?" And Brian, the basketball game's on.
Oh gosh.
Okay. No, seriously, yeah, basketball game's on. Oh, I didn't know that. They didn't tell us in acting school that you don't get an acting partner when the basketball game is on.
Yeah.
I didn't read that chapter.
You can't stop the new world. Your filthy society will never get rid of people like us. It's freezing them. We are the future.
No. Your history.
You won't do it, pig. You won't shoot. Murder is against the law. You have to take me in. If you can. Even I have rights. Don't I? Pig. Take me in. They'll say I'm insane. Won't they? The court is civilized, isn't it? Pig.
But I'm not. This is where the law stops. And I start.
When you don't have that much to go on, how did you fill in the blanks? How did you find?
I wrote a credo for my organization. It was like a 3-page credo of what we were trying to accomplish, just for myself. So it was there, sort of our constitution. And filled in the blanks that way. In action adventure filmmaking, there are a lot of holes, and you're left to fill them with what you can. There wasn't much to go on. And I got to say that Stallone at the time was engaged to and married Brigitte Nielsen while we were filming.
Right.
And that had to have been a tumultuous period of his life. I'd really love to hear him talk in depth about that period of his life, because it has to have been a real colorful, if dramatic, exciting. He had so many things pulling on him. Running a gauntlet that we can only imagine. He was the highest paid actor in the world at that time. He was the first actor to get $12 million.
Mm-hmm.
He was the number one box office draw. Rocky IV had just been released, and it was the number one film.
And Cobra actually had the highest opening weekend gross in Warner Brothers history up till that time. But I guess it didn't have the legs, I guess, that they'd hoped for, because Stallone really wanted this to be a franchise, I think.
I think so. I think that it would have had the legs had the script have been a bit more fleshed out. Had my character actually have had an organization that made sense. It would have, I think, satisfied the appetite of the moviegoer who wants a nice story, to have things, get stuck in the context of a world that we can relate to a little bit.
Right.
So when you got 50 guys on motorcycles, just showing, how did my group organize 50 guys on motorcycles to just show up at this small town? And it was really odd. And that was initially the film was going to shoot in Seattle, and that whole part of the whole motorcycle thing that was shot in Piru, that all took place on a ferry at night in between islands up near Seattle. And so that's sort of what happened to how that kind of got pieced in there.
When you watched the film, but more specifically watched your own performance in the film, what were the thoughts that came to your mind?
I vividly remember watching the movie, and I was in awe at how small a percentage the actual performance is to all the other people that are putting you on the screen. It's the first time I've seen that substantial of a part that I was in. How much the lighting and the sound and the makeup and the wardrobe all is a part of the picture, because it is a story told with pictures. And I felt very proud of the people that had done all the work. Obvious the skill level that they attained to make that picture and put it up there, and how I realized how significant a good performance is, and also how it is so much a collaborative effort that I was like at best 1/5 of what was up there when I was on screen.
Mm-hmm.
When that bass kicks in, dun, dun, and you hear you hear the sparks fly from the forgery, the steel forge, and you hear the sounds of the steel mill, and the voice echoes through the metal halls. It's a wonderful synthesis of all the different departments.
Absolutely, and at the same time, you are at the mercy of the work of these other people, a lot more so than you would be on stage. Yeah. Agreed. And I was, just thrilled with what a magnificent team that Stallone had thrown together. That guy doesn't work with anybody but the best. And
to have gotten to be a part of that team was a home run. A kid a year out of graduate school, come on. Still get residual checks from Cobra.
Really?
So, somebody said to me that, Brian, Cobra might be the most played movie on cable that has ever been. I don't know if someone's charted that, but it's got to be up there.
Well, that's what interested me, because I wanted to ask you, am I, and I guess I have the answer, I knew that I couldn't have been the only one that adores this movie. I mean, I recognize all the kinds of faults, some of which you've expressed in our conversation, but I cannot get enough of Cobra. Anytime it's on, I have to watch it. So do you get approached a lot about this movie?
I would say that it's probably one of the 3 or 4 projects that I worked on that I get talked to about a lot. Obviously, the X-Files is probably number 1. Mm-hmm. Number 2, probably the 2 Van Damme movies that I worked on. Mm-hmm. Dragonheart and Joe Dirt. Joe Dirt is probably the most popular one because that's been in the last decade. But those are those sort of are the top 3 or 4.
Since this came at the beginning of your career and you've done a lot of work in the meantime, when you think back on that time and your work in that film, is there anything that you know now that you wish you could have applied to that experience?
That's a good question. I've got to tell you that I haven't watched the movie since 1986. Mm-hmm. So you know what? I would have to evaluate it now and check it out. I had a lot of good assistants, as I mentioned earlier. A lot of really helpful people, especially Ric Waite, who you interviewed, and his camera team. There's a lot of things that they taught me about shooting to the camera and looking close to the matte box and not to blink so much. We blink a lot in real life, but as an actor, you quickly learn on your first few film sets that, hey, that looks bad on camera. Mm. Would I have applied? I don't know. Mm. I don't really know. It wasn't a real complex part. So I worked at giving it as many levels and coming at it from as much psychology as I could pour into what the script allowed. Could I have poured more into it? I'd have to go back and look, and with that question in mind.
Yeah.
I'm going to say this because it's true. We didn't get much help on Cobra. I told you the character discussion I had with Stallone. The last thing that George Cosmatos said to me on this set was, "You would have been very good if you would have listened to me this film." Oh. And then he walked away. That's, and believe me, I listened to everything that was said. I was, trying to work my way through a pretty wild set. Stallone, Brigitte Nielsen, George P. Cosmatos, chain smoking, script changes. I'm 25 years old. It was a gauntlet. It was all new for me. But Cobra was quite an experience. It was, and then like trying to talk to Stallone. He had bodyguards around him all the time, so you had to, getting near him was physically difficult. Mm. And then you were told not to talk to him in the makeup trailer.
Well, it's good that you got that kind of experience right at the beginning, I guess. So you knew that existed and that kind of working environment, and so you could really appreciate the opposite. I would imagine.
You are so right, and to have, because the Cobra was my second movie. My first movie was Jim Cameron, The Terminator. Mm-hmm. Talk about somebody mean, you talk about a director-producer who knows what he wants and who communicates with you exactly what he wants. There was no comparison. I mean, Jim Cameron is a genius, and one of he instilled confidence in everybody around him, and that was the opposite that we had on Cobra.
So tell me recent or upcoming projects that you're excited about.
I produced my own movie that is called Action Hero. The website is actionherothemovie.com, and we are at present figuring out the best venue to move it to the public. It chronicles a lot of the backstage misbehaviors of the action adventure stars. It is sort of timely in with your interview. Our pitch line is, what if Inspector Clouseau bulked up on steroids and was given the job to direct a movie? And our plot is made up of events that have actually happened during the filming of action-adventure movies, just not all to the same character. You know, we have Schwarzenegger, Stallone, Seagal, Van Damme, Norris, all rolled up into maybe sort of some of their more infamous days of attempting to make an action-adventure movie. Action Hero, themovie.com.